This lecture will be a brief overview of the content of the phonetics class. Over the course of the class, we will talk about what makes up speech sounds with a focus on English, how you do phonetic transcription of speech, again primarily with a focus on English. But then near the end of the class, once your skills are developed a little bit, we will try applying the transcription process to cases of language disorder or other common clinical situations, as well as doing transcription more broadly. This course covers basic phonetics. Depending on what field you're in or what book you're looking at, phonetics can mean a variety of things. But generally speaking, phonetics is the study of the production and perception of speech sounds. In this class, we will focus on the articulatory description of speech sounds using landmarks in the vocal tract. This will relate to the anatomy and physiology that you've learned, but not be nearly as detailed. We will also learn the skill of phonetic transcription using something called the International Phonetic Alphabet. An example of phonetic transcription is my name, Stefan Frisch. Some of the symbols in that transcription are pretty familiar, like the S, T, F, N consonants. Others look a little different, like the epsilon for the E vowel in Stefan, the schwa for the vowel in Stefan, and the small capital I for the I vowel in Frisch, as well as the sh consonant at the end of Frisch, which is that kind of elongated S-looking thing. The study of phonetics provides us with tools for looking at other areas of language. So for example, in my dialect, where I grew up in suburban Minneapolis in Minnesota, I have a distinction between the words cot and caught that a lot of speakers in this area don't have. So a difference between the ah and the aw vowels. For me, the words boy and oil have the same oi vowel, whereas for a lot of speakers in this area, those vowels would be different. Phonetics examines speech sounds as they occur in the real world, so they are things that can be measured. A subfield of phonetics called acoustic phonetics that we refer to as speech science, or that is a part of speech science and communication sciences and disorders, is the most common way that we measure speech sounds. Phonetics gives us the most concrete part of language because it's measurable. You can think of it as representing kind of the end point of speech production or the beginning point of speech perception involving speech sounds. And then we take that speech sound information and put it together to do other things. So other parts of the study of language include pragmatics, which is about the meaning of language in context, semantics, which is about language meaning more general, syntax, which has to do with the order of words and combination of words into phrases to make sentences, morphology, which has to do with the smallest meaningful bits of language, and phonology, which is a slightly more abstract thing than phonetics, has to do with the language sound system rather than the final endpoint of language itself. So as the closest thing to phonetics, we'll touch on phonology in a variety of ways in this class. Phonology is looking at sounds as part of a person's language system or as part of their grammar more generally. So as a more abstract thing in the mind of the speaker and the mind of the hearer. So for example, we have the t sound that appears at the end of fit. That same sound is in fits, but it's different in fitting and fitter, and that kind of R-like looking symbol is the tap or flap symbol from phonetic transcription, which is the standard American English version of the T sound in the middle of those multisyllabic words, fitting and fitter. Those same patterns are found in lots of similar words. So for bite, we have bite and bites with the same T, but biting and biter with that flap sound. Same thing for wait, waits versus waiting and waiter. Pat, pats versus patting and patter, and so forth. Once we have these basic skills of phonetics in place, we can then apply these skills to look at patterns of sound in a variety of contexts. One of them that's common in speech-language pathology is to look at child language development. So individual speech sounds can be important in distinguishing words. So for example, the difference between the word bite and the word bike is a difference between a T sound and a K sound. We can use phonetic transcription of the speech produced by a child to evaluate the development of their sound system. In many kids, it's common to have a what you might call an error or a mistake, but it's really an underdeveloped system. Where some distinctions are made. So the process of velar fronting is common where K-type K sounds are replaced by T-type T sounds commonly. So in the case of a young child, they might not make a difference that you can hear between bite and bike. Our knowledge of phonetics and how speech sounds are articulated can help guide therapy for clients. So knowing the difference in articulation between a K sound and a T sound allows us to coach the client into how to make that distinction. In the case of most kids with this velar fronting process, it resolves on its own when kids are fairly young and they start making that distinction. But if that process persists into the later years of childhood, then parents may seek help from a speech-language pathologist to develop a more adult-like system for the kid. Similarly, in the case of adults, someone may have a stroke in one of their motor areas involved in speech production that results in a distorted articulation. Again, with a knowledge of phonetics, we may be able to work with the client to help them restore a more normal sounding articulation. And another application of phonetics in speech-language pathology is in accent reduction. At the current point in time, society judges people based on their dialect or on their accent. Someone who is interested in advancing in corporate America or in politics, for example, may want to adopt a more standard pronunciation of English to be more accepted in those more prestigious social settings. And there are some clinicians that work in that field. So between learning how to do phonetic transcription of English, we'll be able to do things like score standardized tests of language in children, or make a written record of the perception of someone's dialect or accent or idiolect, which is a term for a person's specific individual way of talking. Knowing the connection between symbols and articulation so that we know what the articulatory postures of each of the English speech sounds are, because that can guide therapeutic goals. And then as we get into applications to a variety of areas, we'll also make you aware of a large number of specialized symbols in transcription that allow us to make a more accurate perceptual record of disordered speech or the speech of other languages. Do things like document a person's use of stress in speech, their timing of their articulation, the overall prosody of the sentences they produce, or the voice quality that's used. So for example, I have a transcription of "let's eat, grandma" versus let's eat grandma, a whispered version of let's eat grandma with no pause in it. Those two would potentially have very different meanings depending on their context, and with all of the symbols that are involved in phonetic transcription, we would be able to make those distinctions.